Hi, good morning. My name is Father Rayappa. Today I'm going to talk about Mahatma Gandhian village economics, that is Swadeshi, Swaraj, and Sarvodaya. But in this segment, I'll be talking about only Swadeshi. And Swadeshi can be translated into neighborliness, localism, or bioregionalism. In other words, in simple words, I serve my immediate neighbor. Okay, think locally and act globally. So that is an axiom on which Swadeshi principle is built. So I care about my immediate neighbor, like Jesus. The best commandment Jesus gave, love your neighbor. So as a theologically seen, Swadeshi principle is very practical, economically and spiritually. So Mahatma Gandhi writes about Swadeshi as follows in his book Swadeshi, which was published in 1908. Swadeshi is that spirit in us which restricts us to the use and service of our immediate surroundings to the exclusion of the more remote. In the domain of politics, I should make use of the indigenous institutions and serve them by curing them of their proved defects. In that of economics, I should use only things that are produced by my immediate neighbors and serve those industries by making them efficient and complete where they might be found wanting. It is suggested that such Swadeshi, if reduced to practice, will lead to the millennium because we do not expect quite to reach it within our times. So maybe not abandon Swadeshi, even though it may not be fully attained for generations to come. Mohanlal Karamchand Gandhi, in his book Swadeshi, started in 1905 in colonial India after the partition of Bengal. Swadeshi movement was the most successful of the pre-Gandhian movement started by Aurobindo Ghosh, Lokmanya, Bhal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Lala Lajpat Rai. Swadeshi as a strategy was a key focus of Mahatma Gandhi, who described it that it was the soul of Swaraj. Swaraj is self-rule. The word Swadeshi derives from Sanskrit and is a conjunction of two Sanskrit words. Swa means self or own, and Desh means country. So Swadesh would be own country. And Swadeshi, the adjectival form, would mean of one's own country, but could be loosely translated in most contexts as self-sufficiency. In other words, it is bioregionalism. The Swadeshi movement was also known as Vande Mataram movement in deltaic Andhra Pradesh. The movement protested the partition of Bengal, also involved the boycott of the British products. The Western clothes were thrown in bonfires, and it was an act of honor to wear the local Indian clothes. The British products were also boycotted in the markets, and the sales of the British fell dramatically. Like many of Gandhi's terms, Swadeshi has both an inner psychological meaning and a secondary meaning in a more outward context. In the psychological sense, Swadeshi is the principle that One acts from the position of strength if one focuses on solving one's own problems, draws on one's own capacities, and addresses one's own weaknesses. One person cannot solve another person's problems or recommend that someone else do something that one has not done themselves. In the other, more common usage, Swadeshi is the focus on acting within and from one's own community, both politically and as a consumer. In other words, it is localism, self-sufficiency, but at the same time interdependence, and in Gandhi's time finally leading to independence, as British control of India was rooted in control of our indigenous industries. From Gandhi's perspective, Swadeshi was the key to the independence of India, and it was represented by the charkha, or the spinning wheel, the center of the solar system of Gandhi's constructive program. He said the cleanest and the most popular form of Swadeshi is to stimulate hand spinning and hand weaving, and to arrange for the judicious distribution of yarn and cloth so manufactured. Swadeshi is an external principle whose neglect has brought untold grief to mankind. It means production and distribution of articles manufactured in one's own country. The term bioregionalism was first popularized in the 1970s by ecologist Raymond, Dasmann, and social activist Peter Berg. Berg defines bioregion as geographic area defined by natural characteristics including watersheds, landforms, soils, geological qualities, native plants and animals, climate and weather. Bioregionalism, Berg suggests, promotes an inhabitatory attitude by which humans adapt themselves to the natural characteristic of a bioregion in an appropriate way. Contrary to current trends towards a global economy in which both resources and goods are freely traded around the globe, bioregionalism emphasizes relative economic self-reliance based on the principle of local production for local consumption. Raymond Dasmann suggests that self-reliance involves development of the capacity to supply the basic needs of people: food, energy, water, clothing, shelter. People should be encouraged to grow crops not for export but for their own consumption. Manufacturing should similarly be geared not towards export but towards meeting local needs. Once basic needs have been met, surpluses can be traded. Bioregionalism offers a radical but non-Marxist alternative to capitalist style of development. Bioregionalism is an opposed to the centralization of political power in government bureaucracies as it is to the centralization of economic power in multinational corporations. Although bioregionalism respects cultural diversity, seeks to avoid the creation of what Berg calls a global monoculture. It is by no means insular or racist. Bioregionalists advocate not only the creation of decentralized political and economic structures that are democratically controlled by local communities, but also the need to build an international grassroots movement that links people together across racial, cultural, and national lines, it is wise to formulate a bioregion paradigm or a new ethics based on bioregionalism principles if we want to create a future of justice and peace. The new ethics of bioregionalism is based on three following simple principles. First, a concern for meeting basic human needs on a universal basis. A high quality of life should not be equated, however, with consumerism or overconsumptive lifestyles. Second is the concern for a social justice. Social justice does not necessarily mean achieving complete equality, but it should minimally involve avoiding any form of exploitation, which allows some individuals in the global arena to benefit at the expense of others. Third is a concern for an ecological integrity. The concept of integrity includes both the idea that natural resources should be conserved for human use and the idea that sufficient natural habitats should be preserved to allow the continued evolution of non-human species. Dasmann and Berg argue that modern capitalist-style development is unable to satisfy. And of these three principles, the growing critique is being mounted against free trade and the global economy on the grounds that increases rather than decreases the gap between rich and poor, undermines democratic decision-making processes, and is environmentally irresponsible. Bioregionalism is not opposed to all forms of trade, nor to remedial aid in times of genuine distress, such as famine. It does suggest, however, that the goal of developmental assistance should not be to draw a given region into a global economy, but rather to enhance local self-reliance. At least two objections can be made to the catch-up model of development. First objection, the notion that the developing countries can eventually catch up with the developed countries, is a biophysical impossibility. The catch-up model erroneously assumes that the earth has sufficient resources to support a growing population at standards of living that now prevail in the developed countries. The dominant value of industrial civilization is that economic growth is a good thing, and that increases levels of consumption lead to greater human well-being. The success of the economy is accordingly measured by how rapidly the production of goods and services can be expanded. The bioregional paradigm questions the assumption that continued economic growth is possible given the fact that the earth has both limited natural resources, limited sinks to absorb the pollution generated by industrial processes. Calculations show that at least 2 to 4 planets would be needed to support the Earth's present population at levels of consumption currently found in the developed world. So, together with the limits to growth, the bioregional paradigm suggests the global collapse can be avoided only if concerted efforts are made to give up the pursuit of economic growth and the catch-up model of development. Bioregionalism is by no means opposed to technological innovation, nor does it advocate a return to Neanderthal lifestyles. It simply argues that economic production should be brought now within the parameters of sustainability, made available by existing technology, rather than placing faith in the ability of technological advances that do not yet even exist to save us from ecological collapse. The goals of bioregionalism are consistent with those set forth by the economist Hermann E. Daly, who argues that we need to move towards a steady state economy in which resources are not used up faster than that they can be replenished, and pollution is not generated more rapidly than the earth can absorb it. A steady state economy would discourage people from indulging in luxurious, overconsumptive lifestyles and focus instead on providing for the basic material needs of all on a more or less equitable basis. While affluent people in the world would be asked to give up unnecessary consumption, a steady state economy would ensure that everyone on the planet had access to adequate housing, food, healthcare, and educational, and things which many of the world's poor do not enjoy even in today's high growth economy. The second objection to the modern development paradigm is that it is simply not working. Despite the fact that development assistance has increased from 1.8 billion per year in the early 1950s to more than $60 billion per year at present, the gap between rich and poor is actually growing. In 1960, the richest 20% of the world's population had 30 times more wealth than the poorest 20%. 1994, the figure was 78 times more. Bioregional critics of development point out that development projects are often the cause of rather than the solution to poverty. The poor in developing countries are increasingly rejecting the idea that their resources and labor should be used to subsidize the overconsumptive lifestyles of our affluent individuals in both the north and south. Alternative development programs consistent with bioregional principles suggest that citizens in both developed and developing countries should use their resources, agricultural productivity and labor to meet basic human needs at the local level. Communities can de-link themselves from the global economy by achieving greater economic self-sufficiency and greater political autonomy. By refusing to ship resources and wealth to developed countries, the poor would be able to provide for their own basic human needs in a socially just and environmentally sustainable manner. In the north, that is in rich countries, meanwhile, there have been increasing calls for developed countries to engage in a process of de-development. As early as 1972, a blueprint for survival suggested that affluent northern societies should limit both economic and population growth and try instead to create decentralized communities based on the concept of self-sufficiency. Similar views have been advanced by Green Party activists and advocates of deindustrialization. In the bioregional paradigm, levels of wealth could rise slightly in developing countries, that is, to levels sufficient to meet basic needs, while levels of wealth in the developed countries would fall since they would no longer be able to exploit the labor or resources of developing countries. The capitalist development paradigm, therefore, fails to satisfy any of the three ethical principles. A bioregional approach, to the contrary, would satisfy all the ethical principles. There is no doubt that asking developed countries to drastically reduce overconsumption and developing countries to curb their aspirations for development will not be popular, but the bioregional paradigm is hardly utopian. It is based on an eminently realistic assessment of how basic human needs can be globally satisfied in a socially just and ecologically responsible way. Rather, it is a capitalist development paradigm with its unfulfillable promise that everyone on the planet can duplicate the overconsumptive lifestyles of the northern affluent society model, which is utopian and unrealistic. Bioregionalism or Swadeshi program supports local crafts. Bioregionalism paradigm depends on the local crafts. They are small craft workshops, small industries, small businesses, and small communities surviving in the suburbs. They produce goods and services on which local people use, buy, and sell. Craft is the place where human needs are satisfied through the honest labor of weavers, potters, blacksmiths, and builders. Multinational corporations like Walmart, Reliance, and Home Depot have crashed the lives of so many craftsmen and small businesses. The rich and powerful don't seem to like them. The city authorities are busy displacing small scale and traditional industries. This is being done in the name of reducing pollution. The government leaders of big businesses refuse to acknowledge that most of the pollution is caused by their own lorries, their cars, and their air conditioners. Behind the mask of improving the environment, the government is dispossessing the small and the weak. What happened to the aspirations and dreams of people like Mahatma Gandhi, who struggled for the empowerment of the masses and not of the few? India is fortunate that there are millions of craftspeople still producing objects of the high quality and making a living. The Indian craft tradition is the most appropriate form of livelihood for the future. If under the influence of machine civilization, this craft tradition is lost, then India will be lost forever. In bioregionalism paradigm, it takes so little from nature. They waste nothing. They exploit nobody. They create no ugliness, and they pollute nowhere. Bioregionalism is the culture of non-violence and the true economy of peace. Bioregionalism is the embodiment of ecology and of sustainability. It is the barrier against consumerism and industrialization and markets and science and technology. It seems that Gandhi's prediction is becoming a reality. Swadeshi is what the progressive movement of the 21st century is calling. Think globally, act locally. Swadeshi is a call to the consumer to be aware of the violence he or she is causing by supporting those industries that result in poverty and harm to workers and to humans and other creatures. In a world moving towards decentralized, localized organization, we might adopt Gandhi's strategy, replacing mass production and consumerism with community, and then form the community of communities, that is, the earth community. Thank you. Have a nice day.